everybody would please take a seat. I want to welcome you to this morning's committee hearing. I'm joined today by Councilmember Jan Perry and Council President Eric Garcetti. Eric, do you want to say we have Spanish translation if needed?
Hay traducción para los habladores de español. Si necesitamos, where the headsets? Hay headsets abajo.
Anyway, again, good morning. We have 12 items on today's agenda. The first 10 items we will deal with, for the most part, on the consent calendar. They're non-controversial items, and I'm sure everybody here is dying to hear an update on my grandson, so I will give it to you. Last night at 8:13, he took his first 3 steps to his grandfather. So I just wanted you to know. He's a young soccer player in the making, I guess. But I will also admit this, Mr. President, since, you know, Ms. Perry can relate to it now. It was a great moment to have him walk, but now it's a challenge to really watch him. Okay, Ms. Barclay, are we ready to get started?
Yes, sir.
We need permission from the city attorney?
No, sir.
We don't? Okay, so the city attorney, you can go home. Read item 1, and I think at the end of it, Ms. Perry has a statement or some amendments to make. Item 1, please.
Item 1 is a Community Redevelopment Agency report relative to the second quarter status of the Assembly Bill 1290 funds for fiscal year 2008-2009.
Okay, so we'll adopt the CRA report on that. Included in it will be Ms. Perry's amendments. Ms. Perry?
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to allocate all of the following AB 1290 funds as follows. The AB 1290 funds from the Little Tokyo project area to the restoration of the Japanese Village Plaza Tower and other public improvements. The tower needs to be repaired due to severe termite damage. Allocate any AB 1290 funds from CD9 Corridors project area to the 28th Street YMCA project. And I'd like to ask CRA to analyze if all the AB 1290 money is needed to repay the Section 108 loans for the Goodyear track and Slauson Central, and report back to this committee and to my office. Allocate $775,000 in AB 1290 funds from the City Center project area to SRO housing for the operation of the Gladys and San Julian Parks and the James Woods Community Center in Central City East. And I would like to allocate the remaining amount to the Venice Hope Recreation Center. Allocate $775,000 in AB 1290 funds from the Central Industrial Project area to SRO housing for the operation of the Gladys and San Julian Parks and the James Woods Community Center in Central City East. And I would like to allocate the remaining amount to public improvements. Finally, allocate any available AB 1290 funds from the Bunker Hill project area to the streetscape and public improvements surrounding Angelus Plaza.
Okay.
Second on that?
Second.
Thank you.
Then without objection, that'll be the order. On item 2, Ms. Perry, you have to recuse yourself on this. So.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This item 2 involves an individual who has chosen to involve me and a former family member in a personal legal action. And so out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to stand up and leave the room, and I'm going to recuse myself from this action and not vote on it.
Okay. We will allow you to exit the room. Ms. Barclay, could you read item 2?
Yes, sir. Item 2 is a report from the CRA and the City Administrative Officer relative to the recognition of interest payments regarding the litigation on the development of the Slauson Central Retail Center.
Okay, then without objection, we'll adopt the CAO report on this item. Somebody please rescue Ms. Perry. Item 3.
Item 3 are reports from the CRA and the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to awarding contracts for parking garage design services in various redevelopment project areas.
Okay, without objection, we'll adopt the CLA report on that item. Item 4.
Item 4 are reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to awarding contracts for entitlement services in various redevelopment project areas.
Okay, without objection, we'll adopt the CLA report. Item 5.
Item 5 are reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to the execution of a management services agreement and a loan agreement for startup capital with the Los Angeles Development Fund for the city's New Market Tax Credit Program.
Okay, on item 5, we'll adopt the CLA report. That brings us to item 6.
Item 6 are reports from the CRA and the CAO relative to amending the exclusive negotiating agreement with 1601 North Vine LLC for the development of a commercial office building at 1601 North Vine Street.
Okay, then on item 6, we'll adopt the CAO report. Mr. City Clerk, do you have item 7?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, I just want to hear your voice.
Very good, sir. CRA report and CLA2 report relative to a memorandum of understanding with the San Pedro Peninsula Chamber of Commerce in an amount not to exceed $100,000, which initiates funding of the Arts, Culture, and Entertainment District Plan within the Beacon Street and Pacific Corridor redevelopment project areas. Sir.
All right, Ms. Barclay, he did pretty good. What'd you think?
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, okay. But we're training him. Okay, then on
Jealousy.
Item 7, we'll adopt the CLA report. Ms. Barclay, that brings us to item 8, and before we read item 8, we've just been joined by Council Member Ed Reyes and Tony Cardenas. Ms. Barclay, item 8.
Item 8 is a motion, Weston Perry, relative to a $1.4 million float loan in favor of the Rancho Cienega Track and Field Improvements Project.
Mr. City Attorney, who's the maker of this motion?
I believe it was the Honorable Chair.
So what do you recommend we do?
I think we should approve it.
I think we will follow the city attorney's recommendation, and we will adopt on item 8. We'll adopt the motion. Item 9, Ms. Barclay.
Item 9 is a motion, Parks Han, relative to amending the CRA's fiscal year 2008-2009 budget to allocate $100,000 in land acquisition funds from the Watts Plan Amendment in order to pay for costs related to the South Los Angeles Plan Amendment merger study and implementation.
Okay, so on item 9, we'll adopt that motion as well. Item 10.
Item 10 is a motion, Han Labange, and a CAO report relative to instructing the Community Development Department to identify funds for continuation of operations at a newly identified day laborer site.
Okay, on item 10, we will adopt that motion. That brings us to an item 11, I believe.
Item 11 is a report from the Los Angeles Housing Department, Affordable Housing Commission, and the CAO and CLA relative to an application for approximately $33 million to implement the city's neighborhood stabilization program.
Okay, could we get the department people to come forward? Mercedes, you're just going to sit there? You're not going to... I know she can, but I just like to look at you. I want you closer.
Maybe you gotta get some new glasses.
Yeah,
Good morning.
Miss Perry suggests I get new glasses. She's probably correct. Okay, who's...
Good morning, Yolanda Chavez with the Housing Department. As you know,
Shh, let's keep it down, folks.
HUD has approved our NSP plan and was officially approved January 5th. We are just awaiting the grant agreement to make the money available. As soon as it is, we'll be ready to roll out the program. We wanted to give you a quick overview of the program. As you know, there are two major components of the program. The first is the walk-in home ownership program, where potential homeowners can buy homes within the priority areas, foreclosed homes. We would provide down payment assistance and rehab assistance of up to $125,000 for borrowers below 80% of AMI and $100,000 for borrowers between 81% of AMI and 120% of AMI. So this would include down payment assistance and rehab money for these homes in the priority areas. As you see the map there, The red and dark red are the priority areas that we've recommended to HUD with risk scores between 7 and 10. These risk scores were determined by the percentage of foreclosures, the percentage of subprime loans, percentage of vacancies. We also overlaid crime stats, violent crime stats, and gang injunctions to show that these are areas where the city needs to invest to stabilize neighborhoods.
Yeah, Mr. Reyes has one quick question.
Just for the record and for the general public, when you say 80% AMI, what does that mean in dollars?
Let me give
And we have
you
120%.
the exact
That way, this
amount.
gives us a feel of economically where people stand.
Right. For a family of 4, the maximum amount someone can earn for a family of 4 at 80% is $37,900 for a family of 4. At 120%, the maximum a family can earn for a family of 4 is $90,950.
Please continue.
So these are the risk areas, the red and very dark red. As you all know, we've been working with your offices and the rest of the council offices to further prioritize neighborhoods, because the goal of the program is to stabilize neighborhoods. And so we need to show HUD that we're making an impact in these neighborhoods. The second component of the program is we will be contracting, and the contract is before you today for approval, with a nonprofit CBDO, subrecipient to this grant, Restore Neighborhoods Los Angeles, which will be buying properties in bulk from lenders and servicers, both single family and multifamily, rehab them, and at least on the single family, and put them out also for sale to new buyers. On the multifamily, they would be also buying them, but then putting them out in bulk, because most of these properties are small, mostly 4 units, and to nonprofit and for-profit developers that are willing to maintain them as affordable housing. So those are the 2 program components. We have been doing a lot of.
Let me ask, and I hate to interrupt you,
No.
but maybe if you could explain how you collected the data and determined, what areas were red, blue, orange.
Sure. What we did is we had to determine, based on HUD data by census tract, the areas that had the highest percentage of foreclosures, the highest number of subprime loans, vacancy rates, meaning that a lot of these homes are remaining vacant for long periods of time, and also income, because we cannot use this money for anyone who earns above 120% of AMI. So that was part of everything that was factored into this. So when we did that, what you see there is that the highest risk areas, because the risk score signifies that these are also the areas that are most at risk. So you'll be seeing more foreclosures within these areas. So when you look at that, the highest risk score of 7 to 10 was the areas that we proposed to HUD where we would be using the money in terms of their requirements.
It's the entire, Mr. Park's entire district.
Exactly. And a point is that all of the council districts, even if you could see 12, 3, 2, 4, have little portions of these areas that qualify. The only council district that has no areas that qualify is Council District 5. But 11 has small portions, so they all have these small portions. In order to prepare, we've been meeting with our lender partners, homebuyer educator partners, to explain the program with realtors. We're also setting up a website to help people identify properties that qualify. We're going to be using Microsoft Live Earth to be able to, so that someone can come onto the website and log in an address, and they'll be able to know whether the property qualifies based on the priority areas. As the program starts, we're going to be moving very quickly with data, specifically REO data, because what we need to let buyers, lenders, everyone know is where the REO properties are available. So we'll be working with you very closely, because as priority areas need to shift, we'll be in communication with you in terms of where properties are selling and where they're not, and let you know that you may have to determine new priority areas within your council districts. So what you have before you today is approval to help us implement the program, including the contract for Restore Neighborhoods Los Angeles and a couple of other budgetary issues.
Ms. Barclay?
Yes, in addition to the authorities requested by the Housing Department, our report also recommends some additional report backs, specifically that the department be, well, report backs are other instructions. The department be authorized to apply for additional NSP funds to the state and the federal government as long as those applications are fully consistent with the plan before you today, and that the LHD be required to obtain council authorization to apply for funds that deviate from this program, and that they also be required to report to council for authorization to receive any funds awarded pursuant to those applications, to receive and expend those funds. We also request that the committee instruct the Housing Department to report in 6 months on the status of the holding company's implementation of the Neighborhood Stabilization Program and their expenditure of those funds, specifically making sure that those expenditures comply with the NSP regulations and that we are on track to meet the requirement that 25% of NSP funds be expended to assist households that are at or below 50% of the area median income. And then there's some additional components of that report back that we recommend as well. Also, given that the Housing Department's implementation of this program is largely funded through CDBG funds allocated through the consolidated plan, we include a recommendation to request the mayor to include full funding for LHD program and admin staff such that those staff will be in place according to the 35th program year consolidated plan to implement this program. And also there was a request from the Housing Department to request the city attorney to prepare and present draft ordinances to implement other components of the rent stabilization ordinance that would protect current tenants of properties that may be foreclosed going forward.
Okay, thank you. By chance, Mercedes, you have another copy? Do we have an extra copy of this, Yolanda?
Yes.
Okay, we've just been joined by Mr. Parks, and we may want to, even though I know Mr. Parks is here to speak on item 12, I think he might find this very interesting because the entire 8th district is affected, is probably the most at-risk district in the city of Los Angeles. Now, members, are there some questions? Ms. Perry and then Mr. Cardenas.
First of all, I wanted to say to the Housing Department, you guys did a great job putting this together in a short period of time, and this is very good, shockingly good illustration, and I appreciate it. I wanted to ask a question on the Phase 1 walk-in purchase assistance with the rehab program. Do you know who would be doing the home rehabilitations?
Yes, we can. On the walk-in program, very specifically, we are limiting the level of rehab for the following reasons. Those, you all know, you've been with us before. When I first arrived, one of the first things I came to report to you was the real dire straits of the rehab program within the Housing Department. And that had everything to do with the fact that the rehab, too big of a rehab job was being done by small contractors, and so it was getting away from them, and families who are working have a very hard time working, raising their kids, getting them to school, and overseeing something that they're not experts in. So what we have done with the walk-in program is limit it so that we're doing essentially cherry picking. We're asking families who are walking into the program to buy, that they buy the homes that are in the best shape in the target areas that lead the least amount of rehab. As a result of that, we're going to go through a competition, an RFQ, with rehab construction people, and have a set of underwriting criteria so that we have an approved list of folks that we can give to families, and if they choose them, they can.
So this will be a new list, but with
a new list.
Pre-qualified
people.
And then on the Phase 2, can you just talk a little bit more about the single-family home right-sizing concept,
Certainly.
because I want to make sure that as we move forward, that we don't disturb a character or the character of a neighborhood.
Certainly. Particularly in South Los Angeles, what we have learned in the last few years as we've worked particularly with the Southwest Realtors Association, who are rooted in South LA, what they have told us over and over again, and we've gone on tours to look with them, is that one of the biggest obstacles to, I want to say this in human terms, right, to repopulate South Los Angeles, right? There are many families in South LA, now professional families, who would love to return to the neighborhood where they grew up. And there are many single moms who would love to return to the neighborhoods where they were raised, essentially so that their parents and others can help with the raising of their own children. One of the things that stands in their way is that in many parts of South Los Angeles, all three, I'd say 8, 9, and 10, is that the homes sit on beautiful lots, right? Some of the more gorgeous streets in Los Angeles with those palm trees. But they're large lots, but very small homes. So many of these are limited because they're 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes. And that has limited quite severely the marketability of the neighborhoods to these families who are looking for the more classic now 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. All right. So what the right-sizing program is similar to what was done with Los Angeles Housing Department and Enterprise years ago with EHOP, is to take a look at these lots and add, I guess, make clear that an addition of 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom would be all right with us, right, within the character of the neighborhood on the lot sizes that can support them. So as we would work with the nonprofit holding company, that's what they would be looking at. We'd be looking at a certain character of home to select that would allow us to right size. And that means that the entire home would get major rehab, so all new systems. And we understand that initially this may be a little bit more expensive, but this is the only kind of money that I have seen in the 5 years that I have been here from the federal government that actually allows this and lets us go up to 120% of AMI for sales. We may never have it again, and it's the kind of thing that will reseed the community for the next 50 years. So from a neighborhood stabilization point of view, this is a great investment, and maybe the only time that I could ever come to you and have the opportunity to recommend it.
Great. And then finally, has the state issued an application for HRA funds they received? And if so, has the city applied? And do you have any sense of what sort of allocation we might receive if we have?
Well, interestingly, the state has not yet been approved by HUD.
That's it?
Got it.
I haven't. I mean,
that's like a real yes or no.
It would be gossip to say more, sir.
No gossip necessary.
They have not yet. Their plan has not yet been approved.
No gossip necessary.
You finished, Ms. Perry? Mr. Reyes after Mr. Cardenas. Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you. When it comes to AMI, how often is that adjusted for our purposes?
Every year.
Every year? What's the AMI right now of whether it be a single person or a 3-person family? Give me one of the categories
Sure.
So I get a perspective of what kind of AMI we're looking at.
Okay, we'll do 120 for a single person. The maximum they could earn is $63,650 at 120.
Do you have the table if it's like a family of 3 or 4?
If it's a family of 4, maximum $9,950. $90,000. $90,950.
Okay. And then 80% AMI, we're looking at
A family of 4, $37,900.
70,900?
37,900 for a family of 4.
All right. And then that table, it really starts to taper off if the family's bigger than that? Where does it start to taper off where it really, for example, when you add an individual, there's a certain amount, and then all of a sudden it starts to taper off, doesn't it? If the family of 7, 8, 9.
Exactly. So at so for example, for a family of 8, at 120% of AMI, the maximum they could earn is $120,050.
Okay. All right. Okay. I just want to get a perspective on that, because sometimes these charts, once the family starts getting bigger, it really tapers off dramatically, and it kind of doesn't help those families much.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to servicing the loans, who's going to be servicing the loans?
It's the lender. So the program works basically the same way for single family, for home ownership, as our regular first-time home buyer program. So the first lien is provided by the lender, and then we provide the second in the form of down payment assistance and the rehab. So these loans are, the first lien is serviced by the lender or their servicer, and the second is serviced by us.
That's what I mean. I mean, so we have a servicing department, or do we outsource
We have a
that?
portfolio department, yes. And our seconds, our down payment assistance is, they're silent, right? No
And that was my
payment,
next
so,
question.
right.
So these, what are the terms of these loans?
Our down
Like on
payment,
phase one, for example.
okay, our down payment assistance, 0 interest, they're silent, no payment until the home is resold or refinanced. On the rehab loan, simple 3% interest, also repaid at the time they sell the home or refinance.
Okay, now, over time, 5, 10 years, or what have you, is any of it forgivable, or?
No.
Okay, so
Well,
this, so the benefit that they get on this one is obviously much more down payment, since it's 0 interest. Are there payments, or
No payment,
okay,
silent.
so it's just, okay, so it's a silent second, so it's a gross amount leaned against the property, and it's not accruing any interest. So, for example, if somebody gets a loan of $93,000, after the end of the first year, it's still $93,000. At the end of the 5th year, if they're still in the home, it's $93,000. So it doesn't accrue in any way.
Right, not the down payment.
On the down payment portion. Now, what the law requires is some sharing, right? They don't want, the law does not, the federal government was very clear that they don't want to give away, right? So, like our other programs, it has an equity share. So at the end of the term, when you refinance or you resell, you don't owe us interest, but we share in the equity appreciation. So if we're 25% of,
So,
God help us, we're lucky and the market goes
proportional.
back.
So on an example, it's very typical, at least in the valley, I don't know, on the other side of the hill, and these very highly impacted areas in the valley, a 3-bedroom home now in Pacoima, or even Arleta, which is a little bit higher price than Pacoima, you can now get a 3-bedroom home for $300,000.
Correct.
So that being the case, if we lend somebody $100,000 and they buy it for $300,000, that means we have 1/3 of the equity, or please explain to me what the formula is like.
This is gap financing.
Okay.
So they only get, so the assistance we provide is really only to make it affordable to the buyer. So in your example, if a family at 120% of AMI buys this house at $300,000, it may need a little bit of rehab, maybe it does, but it may not be the entire $50,000. They only get whatever they need for the rehab. On the gap financing, if they only need $20,000 to be able to afford the home, then that's the loan they get. They don't get $100,000 or $125,000 automatically. It's gap financing. So it's whatever they need to make it affordable.
Okay, but in this world where the banks are not lending 5% down, 10% down, very rare, they're making it very difficult for buyers, first-time buyers, to buy homes without putting 20% down.
But that means the gap is within that market. We're working, what is really important here, the lenders are ready to go. And they're only using FHA-insured products. At this point, nobody is doing Fannie or Freddie, right? It's all FHA. And they're ready.
So buyers with our assistance will be able to do what they've been doing. They can put down 1%, and the rest of the down payment assistance comes from our assistance.
So for example, so then a realistic scenario, if they're using FHA products, FHA is still going to 3% down, right? Okay,
Right.
so if they do 1%, then we'll help them with the 2%, plus closing costs and things of that nature, hard costs.
Exactly.
And then we'll also help them with rehab.
With rehab.
So technically speaking, realistically, it looks like as this unfolds, it's going to be rare to have $120-some thousand into one unit on the purchase program. It's probably going to be more like $63,000, $43,000, $79,000, those ranges.
Right.
But it's limited to $125,000.
Exactly.
Do we have a limit on the amount of percentage down payment? Can we go beyond 20% if there's some
Probably.
interesting? But
It's not that we can't. Let's see what the market.
And it's a gap financing. So it's really what the buyer needs to make that, to make that house affordable.
But, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I'd rather just get these questions out first so that I can sleep at night knowing that I don't have any more questions. Sorry about that.
No.
But the
Well,
thing
we
is,
want you to sleep.
thank you. I'm getting bags under my eyes. But the reason why I'm asking you these questions, I know the banks are using FHA programs, but if a buyer attempts to use this and they are qualified under a non-FHA program, can they convince us to assist them, or do they have to use the programs only offered by the banks in conjunction with our assistance? Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yes, and it really depends what the lender is, which product the lender qualifies the buyer under.
So it's not limited to FHA
No,
products?
it's not limited to
The lenders
FHA.
are just being honest with us and letting us know, based on what you want to do for these communities and these buyers, it looks like this is the most likely product that we're going to be packaging them with.
Right, and it's a little beyond that, because what they're telling us is because of the credit tightening of Fannie and Freddie, that all they're doing right now is FHA. So it's yeah. So
At this point, it is unlikely that the banks will offer anything other than an FHA product. Maybe in 6 months, a year down the road, that could change, and then we would change with them. But right now, they're not.
Okay, so my main point is, based on what you just said, Mercedes, so it's not limited to FHA packaging products. We're just being honest with ourselves, knowing that the market the way it is, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have tightened their credit so much that they're really not lending to these kinds of buyers. So, but as the market progresses and hopefully Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac get their act together and start getting back into the business of loaning to first-time buyers, then we're not limited to only FHA.
Correct. That is why there's nothing in the program, nothing before you ever, that limits anything to FHA.
Okay.
Like everything, it's, we're with the market.
Now, on the rehab, so very likely in the scenario we just sort of described, very likely there's going to be a 0% loan and a portion of it is a 3% loan.
Only
Because the
the
rehab is
rehab.
3%, right?
rehab, only the rehab loan is
Okay.
simple, 3% simple interest.
And then when it comes to assisting with any of the traditional costs and closing a transaction as a buyer, all of that is going to be on the 0% portion.
Correct.
Okay. And how are we going to handle the rehab portion? Are we going to put the money in escrow and they get it as it's being fixed?
Exactly.
Because you
And
just
it-
described situations where you can get a contractor who takes the check and we never see him again.
That is why we're not permitting that. So it is for that reason that we're going through the process of requalifying contractors. It is for that reason that LHD's inspection force will go out, our rehab guys will go out and actually look stage by stage by stage before at each lock period the money is released, because we want to make sure. It is also the reason why we are limiting the level of rehab. If the house is in too bad of a shape, that's something for the nonprofit to purchase and handle as a major rehab rather than an individual family. Because once you permit that, it's just a Pandora's box. And for us, what's very important, as we've had this discussion, is we have to keep this moving. I had said to all of you several months ago that the understanding was that there was more money coming from the federal government. And indeed, there is. Right? In the House version of the stimulus package is $4.2 billion for an NSP2. So for the second phase of this, the Senate is now, starting that. But there's every indication there will be a second wave of money. And so at this point, it is competitive, right? It's not formula-based like this was. So only those that do well now are the ones that will do well for the second round of money. So for us, why we're so focused on impact on all the things that HUD requires is so that we will be first in line to compete for more money.
Now, is there a cap of us that SB2 that we can compete with for? Is it on a per capita, on a region basis?
They haven't determined that yet. HUD will, the language sends it to HUD to determine what the competitive issues will be. We're, of course, will be very active and will ask you to please authorize a letter about what we feel that should be that puts Los Angeles in the best position. So we're looking at it now, and we'll be back
Now,
to you.
the rehab portion is done after the close of escrow, in 9/10 of the time?
Yes.
obviously unless the seller and it's a unique situation.
In this case, it'll be, especially in the walk-in program, always after the close of escrow, because as you know, with foreclosed properties, you want to close the deal because you want to be the investor if it's if it's a buyer.
Okay, one last point. Please understand, I hope that there's flexibility in the program where they're able to do things that they're always quasi-cosmetic, quasi-infrastructure in the property, and that's, for example, carpet. Many studies, because I've been involved in the asthma issue, and many studies show that you got little kids running around a house, and one of the biggest factors of asthma isn't so much that plant a few blocks away. I mean, people don't want to agree with that, but the fact of the matter, it's right there in their home because the carpet is 20 years old, and it is just emitting all kinds of things.
We agree with you, and that is completely taken into account into the program. So we want...
Because some people say it's cosmetic, it's not necessary. No,
we're going to a
infrastructure
serious...
of home.
What we're looking at is how to stabilize the family and the home. So the program, the shift is that this is not about a loan. Okay, the money, the focus here is not about the loan, it's about stabilizing the family and the neighborhood. So we have flexibility in this program that usually HUD does not permit. So we're taking advantage of that flexibility, and we're going for it, right? We want to make sure that this is done so that a family essentially would have to do nothing to that property for 7 years. We're trying to establish what that standard would be.
Just one correction. I was giving you the $37,900 is the maximum for families, a family of 4 at 50% of AMI.
At 50%.
At 50. At 80, the maximum is $60,650. And then the 120 is $90,950.
At 120% AMI,
Right.
90,000.
For family, $9,900.
Yeah, that sounds more like it. Thank you.
Okay. Mercedes, aren't you glad that you came and sat at the head table?
I am always happy to be here. I wanted to share with you one thing.
Go right ahead.
I have been speaking to the Secretary of HUD on a fairly regular basis as we're working through so many issues. And he shared with me last week that the street cred in the building of HUD is that the two best foreclosure plans in the country are New York and Los Angeles.
That's good to know.
Does he have a conflict?
And it doesn't
Am I going to argue with the Secretary of HUD when he ran the New York Housing
No.
Department?
Definitely don't argue with him. Before I turn to Mr. Reyes, I want to remind the members, Mr. Parks, how are you on time? I'm trying to get through this item. Mr. Parks' item is item 12, so I want to afford him the opportunity to speak on that. So if we could, try to wrap this up. Okay, no, you're next. Okay, Mr. Reyes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It feels good to have the clock on me right before I speak, but thank you, sir. I do want to, how much money is coming in from the federal government? Is it
32.8 million in this round.
So, when the money comes in, where does it go? Where does it sit? Or do we get it in increments from HUD?
No. It works basically like a draw. So the money's available, just like all our grant funding. When we have, it's the same way it works with all our federal grants.
So we just pull it in from the Fed.
Right. So we just draw it as.
So there's no bank that gets the benefit of having this chunk of money
There's
sitting.
an account that is set up for that money to be able to account for it.
Okay. Well, see, that was my short question. I mean, I'm just thinking if we're getting all this money, and then some bank is getting the benefit of access or servicing these funds, and yet they're not dispersing the funds we gave them to get to us. I want to see if there's a relationship there, but there isn't, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Garcetti?
Just real briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Housing Department for a great presentation and a great implementation plan. And we've been happy to be along every step of the way for some of the lobbying on this. And as Mr. Cardenas and I were saying, this is unfortunate. It's great and a drop. And if we do a second round, it's going to be a second drop. And we need to get it to a place where the bucket begins to actually fill up. And I know that you're working hard on that, and I'm working hard on that as well. Two quick questions. Are you getting any sense of whether banks are lending right now? Who's backing the mortgages for the first-time home buyers? If we do our work, is there anybody out there starting to do that?
Yes, they are. I mean, when you take a look at the stats, right, half of sales in the county are foreclosed homes.
Okay.
So it is moving, and it is because they have shifted particularly into this FHA product, right? They had to just move. At first, everyone was just stunned and could not move. And now that when they really assessed it, they moved away from their traditional product with Fannie and Freddie and have gone full into FHA. The other thing is that now with the new administration and new HUD secretary, he's very much focused on making sure not only look what's going to happen with Fannie and Freddie, but that FHA is opened. So that it's rolling through. I can tell you that the lenders, particularly because we chose, right, as a policy to close the program earlier when we were clear that that things were moving, they're ready, right? Because this is one of the only products available to them to move it. So we're doing that. So we're good.
Okay.
We're good. I want to thank you also, particularly the CLA and the CAO. They have been incredible. This is very hard. Many of the things that we've done, we're doing for the first time as a city, and not only the ladies sitting here, but the others around. They've done an incredible job. They've been enormous partners, both to prod and to learn with us a whole new level, a whole new lexicon. So thank you very
Thanks
much.
to them too, as well. Second and last question, maybe just even a report back. We know that all of this is mitigation after properties are foreclosed on. Nationwide, it's estimated we lost about $1 trillion in the last round of foreclosures, and in the March resets, we're looking probably at another $1 trillion potentially. In terms of the federal action, I think maybe, Mr. Chair, it would be interesting to have Housing tell us. I know what we're doing locally on counseling resources and things like that, but whether the federal government has begun to engage in workouts directly with the banks, restructuring of loans, or principal write-downs. That's where we're going to make the largest impact in saving people from their homes. And I'm sure all of us would very actively, so that we can change these colors or make these risk factors not actually come and be evidence of what has been foreclosed upon. If you can report back to us, I know that is in process as we speak, but working with the CLA as well, just to find out what is the latest on that. We'll pick up phones. We'll go to D.C. We're going to be out there for the National League of Cities. Mr. Reyes sits on the national board of that, et cetera, but we need to really, all in this room, be focusing as much as we can on that.
No pressure on Mr. Reyes. And Mr. Garcetti, it's my understanding that next week we've got a couple items that will address some of the concerns that you mentioned. Okay, then without objection, we will adopt the joint CAO and CLA report on that item. Again, well done, as usual. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Barclay, if you could read item 12. Mr. Parks, you come forward. Before you start, Meg, I'm going to reduce. We've got about 16 public comment cards. You guys will be given 1 minute because we do have to go to council. So, Ms. Barclay, you read. We'll have Mr. Parks speak. We'll deal with public comment, and then we will vote on the item. Ms. Barclay.
Item 12 is...
And no more cards. It is no more cards. Tara, you just got in on the bell. No more cards, Mr. Clerk.
Very good.
Item 12 is a motion, Parks Padilla, relative to amending the rent stabilization ordinance to keep witness names and drug-related evictions confidential.
Okay, Mr. Parks, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Could I just take 30 seconds and talk for a minute on number 11?
We will allow you to do that.
The issue I think is important, and when we look at this map, is very graphic, but I think it is a benefit in some regards that money's coming forth in communities where housing stock is the oldest, and so we get a chance to rehabilitate it. What I'd ask the committee to concentrate on and with the housing authority or the housing department is the multi-unit evictions hurt us more in numbers of people being displaced than single families, and that is a major issue for us. The second issue of concentration, and I was pleased to hear Ms. Marquez talk about adding possible square footage to homes, primarily looking at additional bedrooms. But in addition to that, I would hope that we begin to consider that many of these homes were built before the invention of family rooms and dens, which now, because of the large families, push these kids and families on the street corners and in the highways and byways of the community because they have no room in the facility. So I would hope we'd also look at how we can expand to provide some of that recreational area inside the residence in addition to additional bedrooms.
Okay, you can be assured this committee will dialogue with the housing department and make sure that your concerns are heard and dealt with.
Okay. Now, on number 12, the one thing we've been at this for a couple of years, but just like to, when we go through the rent stabilization ordinance, I think it is very, very comprehensive. In some instances, very complicated as you go through it. But the safeguards that are present are obvious and very significant for tenants. Certainly, there's a lot of issues that deals with preventing landlords from retaliating against tenants. And also, I think when you read the ordinance and it talks about the array of nuisances that are in the concerns of how people can be evicted, every one of those nuisances, whether it deals with guns, narcotics, gangs, all are intimidating to the community. We give safeguards as to how you can go about the eviction process. We also include housing as somewhat of a referee for fairness. The one area that we're concerned with that is ignored is we lump tenant witnesses in the overall group of witness. The unique thing about being a tenant witness, you're the only one that has to stay there with the problem, and you're the only one where the perpetrator of the problem knows where you live. The agents for the landlord can be victimized, but they move on. The developers, the people that have to do work there, they can move on. The police can move on. The paramedics can move on. We are looking for a way to separate tenant witnesses from the larger group of witnesses and provide safeguards so that as they're living through the eviction process, they're not then intimidated by those they're trying to evict. We would hope we could come up with some language that their identity does not have to be made public until you actually have to go through the court proceedings. We would hope that housing department can be that referee that can distinguish between a landlord trying to circumvent the system and misuse it in behalf of getting rid of a tenant without adequate substantiation, as opposed to those areas of crime that intimidate witnesses to where they're living there and there's no safeguards for them. We'd hate to send the message to them that don't participate in this process, just wait until you're victimized, and then we make a crime report in your behalf. But I think there is a need to separate tenant witnesses from the larger group of witness and provide safeguard for them during the eviction process. And that's what we're trying to get. The motion may not have been artfully written, but that's the narrowness of what we're trying to do, is to eliminate or at least reduce the impact on tenant witnesses and intimidation and crimes against them while the eviction process is moving forward.
So now, do you have an actual amendment that kind of fixes this, or would you like the committee?
I think we have to get I think what we look at the city attorney, and I think housing department, we rely on their judgment. We have some words, but we don't know if it captures the whole essence. But we wanted to come here today and just lay out what the narrowness of what we're trying to do is separate tenant witnesses from the group of witnesses that can move on and provide safeguards as to their identity so they're not victimized. When everyone becomes aware that they are a witness against these acts, they become subject to crime themselves. So we're saying if you get to court, then certainly they have to testify and their testimony is valid. But should they go through this intimidation during the process when they can't move?
Okay, so listen, if you have a few minutes, if I could get Yolanda or Mercedes to come up here, or the representative from housing, before we go to the public comments. Well, let me finish my thought, and you can. Mr. City Attorney, and hopefully we can refine this before the meeting is over. Do you have suggested language that maybe you and I mean how we can accommodate Mr. Parks, or you, and then housing, you weigh in and see if this makes sense to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Deputy City Attorney Judith Reel.
Hakamordazai Housing Department.
We can certainly look at the language. From what I understand, Councilmember Parks would like the Housing Department to keep the names of tenant witnesses to certain evictions confidential. I think we could probably draft something like that. We could distinguish between tenant witnesses and witnesses who aren't tenants. A concern I have, and there might be another way to approach it, is, you know, the department can certainly try and keep information confidential. Someone can make a Public Record Act request, and in certain cases we are allowed to keep confidential the names of people who complain to the city. I don't know if the city could guarantee confidentiality, because after all it would be up to the court. So maybe another approach would be that where the landlord's relying on the tenant to be a witness, then perhaps they don't have to provide that name to the Housing Department. If it's going to be confidential, then I think query what would be the purpose of providing it to the Housing Department, since the Housing Department doesn't have the staff nor the authority or obligation to independently investigate and see whether or not they truly were witnesses. So it might be sort of legally cleaner if the city doesn't want that information to be public at this stage in the proceedings, to simply allow the landlords not to identify those witnesses in that instance.
Housing Department, 1 second, Mr. Parks, just one. Now, you're comfortable with the suggestions from the City Attorney's Office?
Well, we can take a look at that, and within the general broader policy context that is being discussed here. But it is the description that was given by the City Attorney, I think, conforms to what Councilman Parks is asking.
Okay, Mr. Parks, and then Ms.
The only dilemma I have is I think that you could create a dilemma to where landlords can abuse the system if there's not a third-party objective, which I call the Housing Department, to oversee it. And so if you say you do not have to give the names at all, then we have no idea how they're creating the dynamics of eviction. If you have someone that has the information, and I would say, I'm not going to stereotype, I do not believe gang members and drug dealers are using Freedom of Information Acts.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't believe that's happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if Mr. City Clerk, in the event that we were going to move this today, when would this be calendared on the council agenda? When would you think?
Tentatively a week from today, sir.
I need a little time.
If we had the Housing Department, the City Attorney's Office get together and bring what they finally come up with to this committee, let's say for next week. Thanks for the musical interlude. Anyway, if we had this item returned to committee on next Wednesday, and we heard, they sorted it out, could we still hear it in committee, let's say Wednesday, or how, I don't want to slow this down. I know Mr. Parks has been working on this for a long time. You see, one of the individual who seconded the motion is now a California State Senator, so this is something that I'm sure he wants to move through. So suppose I want to make sure that it works, and it would appear that there should be some more discussions to try to streamline it and get the proper language. I'm just trying to get a timetable on when you think, if we brought it back here Wednesday, when do you think we could hear it in council?
At the pleasure of the council president, we could request a same-day placeholder.
Okay.
We could
Okay.
request a placeholder for
Mercedes,
the following
if I might.
Friday.
Ms. Marquez?
This starts to strike at some really difficult due process legal issues. I get it. I understand. But we also have to make sure that whatever we eventually is done is I don't want to use that word because is protected, that we protect the city from any liability for this. So I need to talk to people outside of the city. I want to talk to some other cities, and I'd like to talk to some folks at the state level that work this issue to get a broader sense of what's been done and what's been defended, and another sense of the case law on this. Because one thing is to say, keep it as it is, which is legal, and another thing is to say, don't give us the witnesses at all, which is also legal. It's the part in the middle, once you start, that is a slippery slope legally, and I need some time for that, because that's much tougher than either extreme as a legal issue. So I got to figure it out.
So now what we could do, we could move this, and then you would then begin the drafting of the ordinance.
And in that process, we would take a look and come back to you, because that's the problem. Either extreme is okay. It's the middle part. It's the problem.
And a council member, I mean, how these things typically work and would work better for my office just in terms of timing is council comes up with a motion or an ordinance that they would like to see enacted. They instruct my office to draft it, and then if we believe that there are legal problems, we will come back with either a report or an amended motion and an amended ordinance and explain why. But I don't think we could, fairly do that to everybody within the next week.
I got you. So Ms. Perry has been patiently waiting, very patiently.
Thank you.
Extremely.
Okay, it's my time. Okay. Thank you. I am very, very intrigued by what Mr. Parks has brought before us today because, and this is not something I talk about a lot, but oftentimes we get calls from people inside multifamily buildings because there's gang activity in the building and they're terrified or they're scared. And in many cases I have said to the individuals, leave the building, go somewhere where nobody can see you, and call me from another phone, because I remember one specific case where they were so scared that the people could actually hear through the wall that they were calling me and telling me information that I begged them to go somewhere else and call me. It's that dangerous and that volatile, and in the case of well-documented triple homicide off of Central Avenue, you probably remember that, in doing the follow-up work, which often happens, I'm sure it happens to you too, people will call us from inside buildings on a block where a homicide has taken place, wanting to share information, basically tell on someone after somebody's been murdered. And again, if the building is in an abatement proceeding or something like that, they're terrified. We used to have the Falcon program. Some of you may remember that one. And so we always either say, look, don't talk to me on your phone, because your neighbor may go into your mailbox, get your phone bill, and open it up and read it, which has happened in some cases, and then they'll know you're the one who's calling in and telling. But just leave the premises, write us a letter, and we guarantee your confidentiality so that you're not compromised. And even when I've gotten letters and turned them over to LAPD, what I will do is cut the name off of the person and the address, so there's no reference. And in some cases I've gotten emails from kids inside buildings where there's gang activity and abatements going on, resulting in ultimate evictions, where these kids have emailed as young as 5th grade to give us details because they're so scared.
I want to assure you that we will take this seriously. Many of you know that before I did this work, I was a civil rights litigator. And one of the cases that I worked on was I sued the Los Angeles Housing Authority for violence at Jordan Downs. And I represented 300 tenants there. Their fear was so great that I actually filed their names in federal court under seal, even who they were, under seal with the federal court, because it was so dangerous. So I want to assure you that I get it, and I've dealt with the issue, but the due process problems are quite real. So I just have to figure it out.
Okay, so Mr. Parks.
Yeah, I just want to say that, and I realize that we're not going to come up with a perfect ordinance, but we're just looking for safeguards, and if we collect information and later it has to be divulged and all that, we understand that. The issue is the process as it's going forward. There is no protection.
No, and we get that, and basically what I hope to do at the end of this item is direct you to draft the ordinance. We now know how tricky this is, and 30 days plus or whatever you come back.
We'll get it done.
We probably want, not probably, we this is a concern, it is a problem, we want to address it. Mr. Reyes, and then we're going to go to public comment. So, Mr. Parks, if you want to leave, you can. It's like Allstate, you're in good hands now. So we're going to take care of it. Mr. Reyes.
I just want to make sure that we include existing programs. We have the vacate programs that exist with the city attorney's office. So vacate also addresses some of these issues and how to go about dealing with these types of evictions. And AB 1340 is also still in the books. It'll be there for at least 2010, so we have to figure out how to extend it, get a sponsor at the state level. But I want to make sure we include those two types of resources that we have and see how they factor in with whatever you're going to come up with.
Okay.
But the fact is, we have to streamline these processes. We have to keep them safe. And if one department's already doing some type of action that gets us to the same goal, then we should fold that in and not be duplicative. So I just want to make sure that's on the record as well.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, now let's start our public comment. Fernando Gayton and Dr. James Bothard, please come forward.
No, leave it. It's still for this.
And as I mentioned, only 1 minute, so, and I wish it could be more, but today it won't be. So please, go.
Good morning.
Go ahead, John.
Dr. James Bethard, against this motion, not in totality. I do believe that there is a problem and it needs to be dealt with. We have a program known as We Tip, which has been in function for over 15 years and has been proved very, very resourceful. I agree with Madam Perry that this is so tantamount to people being killed in their own homes, thrown off buildings and stabbed without reason, mailboxes broken into. But we have a system of reporting that is compromising our Constitution of the State of California, the United States, and its articles, are also our municipal codes and the evidentiary acts that needs to be considered. If we displace this onto housing by itself and completely exclude the police department from doing their acts, we bring in the two-pronged points of the prejudicial and the profiling. Please, if you can, do your combining to the wording so that it is direct and it does fall back on our judicial system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fernando Gaitan with the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. As you know, we're on the front lines defending tenants each day, and each day we're seeing more and more cases of abuse by some landlords who will stop at nothing to get longtime tenants out of their buildings. I urge the council to please consider Mr. Arrea's suggestion that we look into protections that already exist under state law that allow the city attorney to take over evictions for a landlord who's unwilling or too scared or threatened to move forward with their unlawful detainer. Just as by way of example, some of the abuses that we've seen, in one case, a landlord accused a tenant of being a drug lookout. And the tenant fortunately came to legal aid and was represented. At the time of trial, the tenant showed up 70 years old and blind. This was a bogus charge, an attempt to weed out the most vulnerable tenant, the lowest paying tenant in the building. So please consider the due process protections as you go forward.
Be assured we will consider all aspects and all concerns. I mean, there's validity on both sides, and all of that will be looked at as we move forward. Mr. Gross and Betsy Handler. Larry? Morning.
Morning. Larry Gross, Coalition for Economic Survival. And no one is opposed to increasing tenant safety from illegal drug activity, but we're concerned about that
Larry, a little softer.
Put back my minutes. You give me 1 minute, I got to rush.
No, I'm saying,
I got a lot to say.
You're competing with Zuma Dog volume-wise. Let's bring it
down.
Oh,
please.
Bring it down a little, and you'll get your time. Just nice and not way out there.
All right. One more time. Larry Gross, Coalition for Economic Survival. No one is opposed to increasing tenant activity or tenant safety from illegal drug activity, but we're concerned that this puts tenants at risk of another activity, that of landlords illegally evicting innocent tenants so they can jack up rents. Without providing tenants accuser information, you are denying due process rights and the ability for them to defend themselves. This will allow landlords, as we've seen, to fabricate claims to target low-rent tenants, those that complain about substandard conditions, or tenant leaders. Many of these tenants don't have the ability or resources to be represented or know that you can get this information at the time of the trial. Most will only just move. And many times we see it's the landlord that brings in the drug dealer to create conditions to force tenants to move. And when the tenants complain about this, the landlord does nothing about it. We need action in those situations as well. We oppose this proposal. We think it's an attack on tenants' rights.
Well, first of all, I think that I have no doubt that this is not an attack on tenants' rights. I really don't think so. I think that it's a concern, and I think as we move forward, and when we bring it back here, we'll afford you guys the opportunity to add input as well. What I think that, I believe what we're trying to do here is to create something that protects people. It has been stated by the department head and our own city attorney that this is a sticky wicket. So we understand that it's going to be a balancing act, but I just want to assure you that nobody on this committee would want to support anything that would make it easier for people to throw people out of their homes, especially during this time.
I appreciate that, and you'll hear the situations that we're concerned about that we're seeing right now, that this could open the door to that.
And I understand that, and I mean, just 6, 7 houses down from where I live, a lady called, complained about some people. They killed her dog. I mean, so this is a problem we need to try to address.
And Larry, can you hear me? Okay. You know, I don't even know what to say about that last comment about landlords moving drug dealers into their house. Then there are buildings. I do so much work in trying to make sure that people are secure. And actually, I think I can speak with a great deal of credibility because I'm probably the one who's built the most low-income and affordable housing, along with Mr. Reyes and Mr. Garcetti. I don't hesitate to build it. I fight for it. I'm not afraid of it. I do mixed income, low income. That's what I do. And like, I don't know. I just wanted to say to you publicly, just to check that reference, because that may be your belief, and I respect your belief, but I think it's kind of irresponsible to say something like that. Okay.
Okay. No. This is not a court. No. Bet's going.
This one is
Larry.
Chill.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Betsy Handler, Inner City Law Center, and I simply want to emphasize how sticky a wicket this is. There are serious due process concerns here. If, for example, a witness is not identified until trial, that means I, as an attorney, can't take that witness's deposition before trial, can't investigate that witness. This creates a real and serious problem. There are also abuses that will be, the door to which will be opened. A landlord who wants to retaliate against a tenant, another tenant who has a grudge against a tenant. It's a very real problem. If the drug problem in a building is so pervasive, the police are the ones to deal with it. People can make reports to the police anonymously, and the police and the criminal justice system should deal with it. Eviction also will move the drug problem from building A to building B. It doesn't solve the fundamental problem.
Thank you. Elena, and...
I just want to say, sir, enjoy your grandchild now, because when he gets to be a teenager, you won't see him.
Trust me. It might be a good thing. Jillian Broadmoor, or Broadman? Elena, how are you? Good
I'm
to see
fine,
you.
sir. Good to see you, too. Thank you. Good morning. As has been stated, one of the fundamental concepts of our judicial system is the right to confront witnesses and prepare a defense. And what I think the council needs to remember is that every time a tenant is evicted from one of our 60,000 rent-controlled units, we are losing an affordable unit that we can't afford to lose. And unfortunately, many owners of that housing do seek to circumvent the rent restrictions by falsely accusing tenants of illegal activity. That happened to Mr. Nolan. The city attorney's office and 4 officers accused him of committing a crime. It was a case of mistaken identity, a single dad paying $649 a month rent. The Zavala family, 10-year tenancy, bootleg unit. Landlord hits them with an illegal rent increase. They go to the city. It results in a citation. Response, instead of paying the relocation, illegal drug activity. I won both of those cases, but the truth is that those families were exceedingly lucky. There are 40,000 evictions filed in LA County every year. Of those 40,000 tenants, less than 4,000 are represented by counsel. If you could just allow me just a little bit more time.
No, because I got so
Let's-
many people.
Yeah,
Why don't you submit it for the record? We've got to be in council in a few minutes, and I got like 7.
Let me just close by saying, what the city should be doing is getting lawyers for people. Here are the resources. That would be worth doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
We have a joint statement.
Okay, then you got a minute. Do it how you want to do it.
Take a deep breath and
let it rock. It's American Idol.
Okay. Hi. My name's Renee. I'm with the Regency Garden Tenant Association. Our building is managed by Investors Management, which Tony Swan is currently management supervisor. We had an issue a while ago with pets we had pets. They were known by management. It was a verbal agreement. They moved new management in and tried to make us either get rid of the animals or make us leave. Tony Swan was also heard by somebody and saying that he was going through our file. We're going to find something on them. We're going to get them out. On a separate occasion, the manager was approached our neighbor, and he asked if he would write a false statement against us, saying that we never had the cats for longer than a couple months, and that he would receive his entire security deposit back. But go.
Well, you can. I have 1 minute too. Go ahead.
But no.
Okay. I have 1 minute on the clock. We both have time.
Did you fill out a card?
Yeah, we both did.
What's your name?
Jillian Boardman, and this is Renee Weber. But we
Okay,
had a
then guess
statement that we
what?
wanted
So
to be together.
guess what? I was going to call you next anyway. Okay, so your time is up now.
And my time.
Renee Weber, you're on the clock. And then there's a Rita Abadier that I think lives in the same area.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why don't you come forward? And so it's Miss Weber, right?
Yeah.
You're on the clock.
We are good tenants who pay rent on time, never have parties, and have many friends in the building, and the only logical conclusion as to why they would go to such lengths to evict us is because of the
Ms. Ford.
longevity of our tenancy. We are not the only ones who have had management try to write false witness statements against us or experienced harassment, and in fact our story is quite mild compared to others. A petition was started for a change of management, which was signed by 35 tenants and given to Tony Swan, who we were made aware is one of the main components for this move in witnesses. Tony Swan responded saying he was aware of almost all the incidents on the petition, ranging from management physically assaulting a tenant to management verbally harassing the children of the building. I want you to know these facts and a little bit about what we've had to endure under the management supervision of Tony Swan. I've seen grandmothers cry over the things this management has done to her grandchildren, and I've heard adults and children alike tell me they feel like they're living in a concentration camp. I, like any other concerned tenant, want to live in the safest environment possible, but I ask you to look beyond the obvious and question the ulterior motives behind this motion, and to further examine the moral content and character of Tony Swan, the man who's working to have this motion passed.
Thank you. That was a good statement. And next, are you Maher?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're next. I'm glad you, or are you translating?
Yeah, you're going to probably read it slow, but I would like to read it for him if it's possible.
Please, it is possible. And welcome to both of you.
Oh, thank you. I got involved in the tenant association because my wife and I were being harassed by the manager for no apparent reason. Then they want us to move out. The harassments were such as coming into my apartment with a camera without giving us a notice, start taking pictures, asking us to keep our windows closed at all times and keep our children inside the apartment and not play outside, or we get evicted. Then on September 2008, there was an incident where the manager assaulted my wife. We made our intention to file a lawsuit clear. Then in January 9th, I had a visit from the FBI. I'm a chemist and I am from Egypt, which makes me an easy target. The FBI investigators came to my house, indicated that someone from the building, whose name could not be disclosed,
Finish.
made an allegation that I was an anti-American and I made anti-American comments. Nothing could be further from the truth. I love this country. My life, like the life of so many during the era of McCarthy, lies on the brink of ruin.
Thank you. Now, thank you. Sorry for Sorry for the visit by the FBI. And what you can do is the statement can be submitted to the city clerk so it is on the record. Next, I will have.
I also would like to state, sir, real quick, that also he was terminated from from his job as a chemist.
Thank you. Got you. Mr. Jim Clark and Gumaro Flores. Morning.
Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Jim Clark, Executive Director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. I just want to say thank you for your consideration on this item. Ms. Perry, thank you for your comments earlier about some of the paranoia that goes on with regard to our adversaries. I want to make it clear that there can be a fair result in this that will help keep buildings safe and clean. And out of time's sake, I will thank you once again and
thank you.
Yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Gumaro Oviedo from El Comité de la Esperanza, the oldest and largest tenant association in the Boyle Heights community, known as Weibergut. For those of you who don't know us, we are 12,000 units of rent-controlled housing near from Sears Tower. In 1997, our community was bought by 15 Group. Shortly after their purchase, 15 Group boasted in the apartment industry publication that they had hit a home run in the slums. They boasted about how they planned to turn our community into a money maker. How do you do that? You have to raise the rent, including doing everything to get out the rent control. Their first strategy was to harass people into leaving via various methods, including issuing false notice, charging rules, making in part of our leases, for instance, that anyone that is outside after 11 p.m. will be presumed to have committed any crime in the community that takes place that night. They managed to frighten us and get large number of people to live in their management figures are correctly. There are only 200 affordable units.
Last sentence.
Okay. In our Weibergut now, they have get out like 1,000 families, and they are trying to make money in
I got you. Thank you. Mr. Leonardo Lopez and Marina Garcia, come forward, please. We've got about 3 or 4 more. We should make it.
I'm going to be translating.
That's great.
Sí, mi nombre es Leonardo López nuevamente, soy presidente del Comité de la Esperanza, del que habló mi compañero.
My name is Leonardo Lopez. I am the president of El Comité de la Esperanza, the same organization as my compañero.
Vamos a cumplir 25 años que luchamos por los derechos del inquilino.
We've existed for 25 years and we fight for tenants' rights.
Y soy uno de los fundadores.
And I am one of the founders.
Durante mucho tiempo sabemos que los dueños a veces se inventan cosas falsas para sacar al inquilino.
For a long time we've known that landlords often invent things in order to evict tenants.
Sobre todo en este tiempo que los dueños quieren aumentar de 1,187 apartamentos.
Especially right now when in our community they want to raise the number of units from 1,087 to
a 4,400 apartamentos.
4,400 units.
Entonces, más de 7,000 personas que vivimos ahí.
More than 6,000 people live in Wyvern Wood.
Vivimos, nos conocemos y vivimos con una ciudad hermosa dentro de ahí, una ciudad pequeña muy bonita.
We live there, we know each other, and we're like a small city, a small community that lives there together.
Muchas veces los dueños inventan que a un muchacho anda haciendo cosas para poder desalojar al inquilino.
Sometimes the owners make up things that a child is doing things in order to evict the tenant.
Y a veces el muchacho ni vive ahí.
And sometimes the child doesn't even live there.
Y ya les llega la noticia, tiene 3 días para que se vayan.
And then the notice comes, you have 3 days to leave.
Y muchas veces el inquilino se va por miedo, por pánico, se va, ni siquiera agarra abogado y se va.
And sometimes tenants panic and they move without even consulting a lawyer.
Entonces ahora creemos que está haciendo mala presión porque tan solo por hacer una comida afuera ya nos están queriendo desalojar.
And now the pressure is getting even stronger. We'll have a little party and have a little food outside, and they try to evict us for that.
Entonces, creemos, está habiendo muchas injusticias, los cuales están presionando mucho al inquilino, y siempre nos llegan noticias que nos quieren sacar, y tenemos que llamarle muy seguido a Elena, porque muchas veces es injusto lo que se está haciendo.
There's been a lot of injustice. The security guards put a lot of pressure on tenants to move, and we often have to call Elena, that would be
And
me.
if you could please wrap it up right now,
Y si
please.
puede terminar.
Sí, nomás digo, yo sé que ellos van a si no hay testigos, si es más fácil sacar al inquilino, va a ser más fácil que nos saquen. Ellos van a decir, no es por culpa de nosotros, es el inquilino que está cometiendo los errores, y ellos van a decir, por eso estamos haciendo esto que estamos haciendo, y ya no tenemos casi gente que paga mucha renta.
If there isn't a requirement to identify witnesses, it's going to be even easier to evict people, and that is the reason why there are so many people left at Wyvern Wood who are paying the lower rents.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be translating.
Okay.
Mi nombre es Marina García y
name is Marina García.
hablo respecto al problema de
And I
que también
wanna speak about the
yo estoy de
problem
acuerdo en que
that-
se hagan los nombres, que haya testigos y que se digan los nombres.
And I would like to make sure that their names of witnesses are available.
Porque también sí es cierto que a veces los mismos managers están de acuerdo con los dueños en estar comentando de que tal persona da problemas o hay discriminación o racismo, los mismos managers lo cometen.
Because it's true that there are managers and owners that talk about themselves about tenants that are problematic in making complaints.
Y ellos mismos provocan, buscan la manera de poder sacar a las personas, a los inquilinos.
And they look for ways to get rid of these tenants.
Pero sí, en eso sí estoy, y me consta, porque vivo en un edificio donde el mismo manager está de acuerdo con los mismos propietarios y buscan cualquier pretexto para sacar a las personas.
The manager at my building is always in communication with the managers, and they're ready to kick out whatever family is a troublesome family in there.
Solo lo que yo pido, o sea, por todos, es de que también se investiguen más a los managers que se quedan a cargo de edificios.
She's asking not only should tenants be investigated, but also managers, because sometimes they are the ones that create the problems in the building.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Claudia Medina and Helen Campbell. And last, Tara, you.
Good morning. My name
Good
is
morning.
Claudia Medina. I'm an attorney at Eviction Defense Network. I understand the concern over gang violence. I grew up with having to deal with that, having to live in an environment where that was an issue. But I also know that I represent tenants where the only thing they've done wrong is that they live in a neighborhood that's trending now, and they've lived there for many years, and they're under rent control. So I see landlords go to extremes to try to evict my tenants. I carry a caseload anywhere from 8 to 12 different cases a week, and that's just very common. I have some tenants that are on their third, fourth eviction case in 2 years, and each eviction case is a different allegation. And that's just one big concern, that this would weaken rent control protections and make it easier for landlords to make up allegations to evict tenants.
Thank you. What happened to you?
Oh, I sprained my foot.
Okay.
Around, yeah. No, but my
Good
name.
morning.
Good morning. My name's Helen Campbell. I'm here with Healthy Homes Collaborative. We're an organization, a nonprofit that is committed to eliminating environmental health threats in the home. And in our experience, when we're basically dealing with lead poisoning prevention and abatement. And a lot of times, landlords will evict tenants instead of abating their unit because it costs about an average of $15,000 to abate one unit. And they're not keeping their buildings up to code, but they're using eviction as their first line of defense. And so the real problem is about slumlords who degrade the environment, not drug dealers who degrade the environment. And we are sensitive to issues that, because drugs destroy families, obviously, but this doesn't do anything to solve that problem.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, she's a former intern of mine, master's in urban planning, UCLA, and has been great working in the community. So good to see you here, Alan.
Good to see you.
Congratulations.
And be careful. Don't sprain the other ankle. Tara?
Good morning, council members. Tara Bannister, Executive Director, California Apartment Association, Los Angeles. I want to very quickly mention this is not just an issue in low-income or family type of buildings. This is something that actually applies to the luxury apartment buildings because, as you could guess, drug dealers make a lot of money and they often move into very luxury buildings, which brings crime. It brings violence to buildings that and people that you wouldn't expect. So this is something that affects every part of the city. This is not just an issue about the privacy of witnesses, it is also an issue about the safety of witnesses and of others in the building. And then very lastly is that I would request that Jim Clark and I, AGLA, our association, also get an opportunity to sit at the table. This is something many of us have worked on throughout the Los Angeles area and throughout the state, so that we have some answers to some of these questions. Thank you.
Basically, what I don't know if there's going to actually be a table, but our city attorney and housing people will try to discuss this, and we want to make sure that you're afforded, just like the housing advocates or Mr. Gross's side is afforded the opportunity to give some input. And I want to say this, and I want to turn it over to Mr. Cardenas. This is a very difficult issue, very challenging, but just because it's tough, just because it's difficult, it doesn't mean we can't look at a way to try to make it work for both sides, and that's what we will be attempting to do. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you do not. The worst thing that we could do is not try. And I want to just make this crystal clear in everybody's brain. There is not a member on this committee that is trying to come up with some trick or some way to make it easier for individuals to be thrown out of the place where they stay. Mr. Cardenas, and then we're going to...
Real quick question. What association are you representing?
California Apartment Association. I live and work in Los Angeles.
Okay. Now, if one of your members is found guilty of abusing the system in court or what have you, and they lose a case, are they still allowed to be a member of your organization, or do you throw them out?
No, sir, they are not.
They are not?
They are not.
So
We have a residence bill of rights.
All the members of your organization, all the members of your organization do not have that on their record.
As far as I know, yes.
Now,
However, if we can find one, then I will change that.
My second question, I hope you will. My second question is this: how often or whose responsibility is to update that information? Is it left to the member, or does the organization? Are they afforded by the members the authority and ability to go ahead and check up on them and then notify them and say, hey, buddy, this last April you lost a case and it looks like you were a bad guy or a bad company. Why didn't you tell us? We found out, so you're no longer a member.
Actually, we have an ethics committee in all of our 19 local associations, and that ethics committee goes over our membership list every single month.
Okay. Well, I'd love to get more details on that.
Okay, thank you, Tara. Then, Meg, while we still have a quorum, what I think the recommendation should be is that we adopt the motion, try to include the verbal amendments, direct the city attorney's office and housing and whoever else to report back to us within, let's say, 60 days to see if we can't work this out. So without objection, that'll be the order?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, also, it's my understanding that we have to revisit item 10 so that we can add an amendment or include the CAO report?
Yes, sir, there is a CAO report on file with additional recommendations. We recommend you adopt that
So
report.
then, without objection, that'll be the order. Any more business before this committee?
No, sir.
Then this committee's adjourned. Thank everyone for coming.
Yeah.
We made it.
You guys are making me nervous.
Yeah, it was. I tell you what, yeah.